The air in Chicago was cool and crisp that morning, the kind of breeze that danced between buildings and whispered old memories into the ears of those willing to listen. Ava Miller wrapped her trench coat tighter around her frame as she stepped out of her apartment on West Addison Street. The sidewalks were slick with yesterday's rain, and the leaves had begun to gather in golden piles along the curb. Something about the morning felt unfamiliar, like change was drifting just beneath the surface. Ava was 32, single, and a publicist at a mid-size firm downtown. Life hadn't turned out quite how she imagined it would back in college. She had friends, a decent job, and a comfortable one-bedroom apartment, but deep down she felt like something was missing. Or rather, someone. She hadn't thought about Jackson Reed in years. At least she told herself that. But truthfully, he had lived in the background of her heart like an unfinished song. They met during sophomore year at Northwestern University. He was majoring in English literature, with messy hair and a notebook always sticking out of his backpack. She was studying communications, always on the go, always one step ahead of her feelings. They were a perfect storm, full of intensity and warmth until they weren't. He left without explanation one night in April. Said he needed time to figure things out and couldn't do that while being with her. That was nearly 10 years ago. She had cried for weeks and deleted every photo, every text. She forced herself to heal by pretending she had already moved on. That morning, as Ava sipped her latte and opened her inbox, she saw a new email titled, Reconnecting. The sender's name sent a bolt of electricity through her. Jackson Reed. She stared at it, heart pounding like a drum. Slowly, she clicked it open. The message was brief. Ava, I know this is unexpected. I'm back in town for a while. I'd really like to talk if you're open to it. No expectations, just coffee and honesty. Jackson. She read it 3 times before her fingers hovered over the keys. She closed her laptop instead. The weight of the past settled on her shoulders. The next few days passed in a blur. Every little thing reminded her of him. A song on the radio, the smell of rain, a street corner where they once kissed. She hadn't realized how deeply buried he was in her until he surfaced again. Eventually, curiosity outweighed pride, and she responded. They agreed to meet at a small cafe in Lincoln Park, a quiet place tucked away between a bookstore and a florist. When Ava walked in, she spotted him immediately. Time had shaped him. His hair a little shorter, a little darker. His jaw was more defined, and his eyes still carried that quiet depth. Ava, he said, standing as she approached. Jackson, she replied, unsure whether to hug him or shake his hand. She chose a half-smile and sat down instead. The air between them was thick with history, the kind that doesn't evaporate with time. You look good, he said, nervously adjusting his jacket. So do you, she replied, taking a cautious sip of her coffee. They talked for an hour about everything and nothing. He had moved to Portland, worked in publishing, got engaged once but didn't go through with it. She shared pieces of her life too, though she kept certain truths buried, like the nights she cried herself to sleep wondering why she wasn't enough. Eventually, she asked the question that had haunted her for a decade. Why did you leave like that, Jackson? No note, no call. Just gone. He sighed and looked out the window. I was 22 and scared out of my mind. You were everything I wanted, and that terrified me. I didn't know how to love someone else when I barely knew how to love myself. So I ran. Ava swallowed the lump in her throat. You broke me. I know, he whispered. And I've lived with that guilt every day. The honesty between them hung like mist, soft but unavoidable. Over the next few weeks they saw each other more. Lunches turned into dinners. Dinners turned into long walks around the lakefront. Jackson wasn't trying to win her back, and Ava wasn't looking for closure anymore. They were just two people rediscovering a friendship once lost to time. But emotions are rarely so simple. One night, as they sat beneath the Chicago skyline, Jackson turned to her. Do you think we met too young? Ava thought for a moment. Maybe. Or maybe we just weren't ready back then. He nodded slowly. And now? I'm not sure, she answered honestly. You coming back, it stirred up a lot. But I've changed, Jackson. I'm not the same girl who waited by the phone back then. I know. That's why I reached out. Not to undo the past, but to be part of your present, if there's room. There was silence, and then Ava smiled faintly. I think we owe it to ourselves to find out. The days turned into months. They took things slowly. No big declarations, no pressure. Ava introduced him to her friends, and Jackson showed her the manuscript he had been working on for years, a fictional story loosely based on their love, raw and poetic. Healing didn't come in one dramatic moment. Came in the quiet things. In shared laughter. In the way he looked at her like he finally understood her worth. In how she learned to trust her heart again. But life, in its unpredictable nature, offered one more twist. Jackson was offered a permanent job in Portland. An editorial director position he had dreamed of. Meant leaving again. Only this time he didn't want to go without her. I want you to come with me, he said one night. Eva blinked. Jackson. I know it's a lot. And if the answer is no, I'll understand. But I had to ask. She looked out at the city that had been her home for a decade. Chicago had given her stability, identity. But Jackson offered something else. Possibility. After a few days, she made her choice. She stayed. Not because she didn't care about him, but because she finally understood her own value. Ava wanted to build something of her own before folding into someone else's world again. Jackson understood. They cried a little, laughed more, and promised not to lose each other this time. He left, but this time with a hug and a kiss and the promise of visits and phone calls. They kept in touch. Weekly calls became daily texts. The connection remained strong, but now there was maturity in how they handled it. A year later, Jackson moved back. Not because of a grand romantic gesture, but because a job opened up in Chicago, and his heart had never truly left. When he returned, they didn't rush into labels. They simply picked up where they left off, with coffee and honesty. Sometimes people come back into your life not to repeat the past, but to show you how much you've grown. Not everyone deserves a second chance, but some do, especially when both hearts have done the work. Ava and Jackson didn't end in a fairy tale kiss. Their story was better, it was real. A tale of reconnection, of healing, and of knowing that love doesn't always knock twice, but when it does, it's often worth answering the door.